Hello, everybody. My name is Gianna Perella, and my partner's name is Victoria Camp. We're going to be talking to you about if single-sex schools are effective. The outline for today's presentation, we're going to be starting off talking about the history, followed up by key questions. We're going to get into boys' statistics and then girls' statistics. We're going to look at the social skills for both sexes. We're going to spend some time looking at the different learning styles, such as visual, auditory, reading/writing, or kinesthetic. We're going to get into the pros and cons of single-sex schools. We're going to play a video for you that relates to this topic and wrap up with an activity that you guys can play in your classrooms next year. We're going to start with talking about the history. So starting in 1635, that's when the nation's first public schools came to be, where they only admitted boys. And Thomas Jefferson was one of the first people to have this educational philosophy that emphasized the importance of improving the general welfare of the society, which basically meant that he felt like schools should not be limited to admitting only upper-class white men, but it should be available for everybody. So as this adapted, girls started being able to attend schools, but they weren't the schools that we know today. They were what they called dame schools, where their curricula focused mainly on manners and morals rather than literacy. So girls were taught things like sewing, embroidery, and other graces. And most girls during the 17th century received their only education at these dame schools. Whereas boys who came from a household who could afford it would usually go on to attend a grammar school, which was taught by a male teacher and focused on more advanced studies. The reasoning for this is they thought at the time males needed to be educated to participate actively in the new republic, and females were required to learn just so they could raise intelligent and knowledgeable sons. Also, for a while, it was viewed that only men could be educated. So depending on the area and the time period, sometimes only rich men could have an education, sometimes all men, and even other times only men of a certain race or color. So then we start to see this need arising. And this need was caused by a lack of funds, as well as political or personal convenience. And this prompted many communities to adopt this mixed classes model rather than build separate schools for boys and for girls. We see private and parochial schools being the last remaining sites of single-sex education at the end of the 19th century. So we're seeing that this need was so large that the single-sex schools just became unrealistic, and the mixed classes setup became more of a reality. By the 20th century, there were cries for equality, which began in the women's movement. By 1972, Title IX passed. This prohibits the discrimination based on gender. So this was a big win for women and girls in education. Starting in the late 1980s, educational leaders began to establish single-sex classes as a potential solution to some of the problems in inner-city schools. So it's kind of like we got rid of the single-sex classes, only for it to kind of full circle come back to help other problems that we're seeing now in these mixed classes, these co-ed classes. Since these schools are private, they can get away with being single-sex as long as they remain private. Public schools must accept girls, or in some cases boys, or they are in danger of losing their funding or accreditation.
So here are a few essential or key questions that you may have when thinking about this topic. What is currently known about the effects of single-sex schooling on student achievement and other outcomes? What perceived benefits or disadvantages are associated with single-sex schooling? And how do the different sexes differ socially as well as academically? We've listed a few statistics for both male and females that may contribute to the single sex schooling argument and help determine if single sex schools are effective. So for the boys receive lower report card grades. Boys are far more likely to be grade repeaters. Boys suffer hyperactivity and stress 9 times more frequently than girls. Boys are more frequently identified for special education. Boys receive greater behavioral penalties. Boys comprised 70% of school suspensions. Boys are 3 times more likely to become alcohol and drug dependent. Boys commit suicide 2 to 3 times more frequently than girls do. Boys are 80% of high school dropouts. Boys make up less than 44% of college population. Boys, on average, are a year to a year and a half behind girls in reading and writing, according to the United States Department of Education, and more boys participate in school athletics than girls do. Now for the girls. Girls represent 49% of students in elementary and secondary education. 57% of students in post-secondary education are women. Since 1976, girls enrolled in gifted and talented education programs have outnumbered the amount of boys enrolled. Girls outnumbered boys in enrollment in AP Science, AP Foreign Languages, and several other AP subjects. In AP Math, however, like calculus and statistics, boys have consistently outnumbered girls by up to 10,000 students. In 2009 to 2010, females made up less than 25% of participants in science, technology, engineering, and math programs nationally, which makes sense when we look at the last statistic about boys outnumbering girls in AP mathematics classes. Females made up 21% of participants at the secondary level and 24% at the post-secondary level. Data in the last 20 years shows the general trend of girls outperforming boys in academic achievement and boys performing worse than they did 20 years ago. Discrepancies in girls and boys' achievement can be seen in things like their literacy scores, school engagement, discipline referrals, dropout rates, and college admittance numbers. Girls outnumber boys in most other extracurricular activities, such as student government, fine arts, and club participation. However, keep in mind that boys outnumber girls in athletics. So typically, girls and boys acquire different social skills. On average, there are clearly gender differences when it comes to this. Boys struggle academically and behaviorally more than girls and are more likely to have difficulty with social skills. Girls have stronger levels of self-regulation and adaptive classroom behavior than boys. And we know that classroom achievement not only depends on cognitive skills, but also on certain behaviors that are adaptive to the demands of the classroom environment.
So these next few slides are going to focus on the different learning styles that you may encounter in your classroom. We've provided strengths and strategies for each for additional assistance if you need it. So the first learning style we're going to talk about is visual. Some strengths of the visual learner include the ability to visualize objects. They have a good sense of balance and alignment. They're usually very organized. They are very color oriented. They can picture words from a book or pictures in their mind. They can identify simple similarities and differences in things. They utilize imagery to help them learn, and they can use visual aids to explain themselves. Now, some strategies if you encounter a visual learner in your classroom would be using visual aids like images, diagrams, videos, etc. Grouping these visual learners together during group projects so they can harness their strengths. Allow reflection time after lessons so visual learners can visualize their work. Encourage them to color code their notes. Try incorporating color into presentations and assignments. give written instructions for assignments, write to-do lists and agendas on the whiteboard so students who prefer this visual style, they can actually see the plan. Give time for reading in class so that visual learners have the opportunity to learn better. Show students how to make vocabulary flashcards, and provide written feedback on assignments.
The next learning style that we'll be discussing is the auditory learner. Auditory learners have good memory for spoken information, good public speaking abilities, they have strong listening skills, they excel in oral presentations and exams, they're good at telling stories and have the ability to read aloud and actually retain the information. However, and this can be seen as a weakness, they are distracted by background noises and they're distracted by silence. They enjoy conversations. They're unafraid to voice their thoughts and opinions. They could be looked at as a good member in study groups and collaboration projects because they are always giving their opinions. They're able to understand and process changes in tone. They work through complex problems by talking out loud. They're able to explain ideas pretty well. So overall, they just have solid communication abilities. Some strategies for teachers to follow. Teachers should utilize podcasts. Give students the option to read articles and listen to podcasts to learn about certain subjects. They should record lectures. If a student is out sick, listening to the lecture instead of reading notes can be a great way to help auditory learners, and it will ensure that they keep up with the rest of the class. They should host question and answer sessions. Give students the opportunity to verbally ask questions and hear the answers, helping auditory learners clear up misunderstandings or concerns. Teachers should call on auditory learners. An auditory learner retains information by hearing it spoken out loud, so having them answer a question will help them learn the information better. They should reward class participation. Give students the opportunity and motivation to participate by speaking and conversing with each other and the teacher. Play background music during silent times. One main weakness that we already discussed was that the auditory learner gets distracted by background noises like pencil tapping, peers whispering, the air conditioning, and much more. So auditory learners often appreciate soft background music to drown out distracting noises and silence. This can be a good way for auditory learners to focus. The teacher can also read aloud. Use opportunities to read aloud to help students get information through reading, but still be able to use auditory functions to help them comprehend it better.
The next learning style we're going to talk about is the reading/writing learning style. So some strengths that you will see with these students are that they comprehend and they remember what they read, and they often enjoy writing. They learn best by writing and rewriting information. They'll use lists, headings, dictionaries, glossaries, and definitions to understand concepts. They work well with textbooks, handouts, and manuals, and they often take notes verbatim in class. They do well with multiple choice and essay tests, and they learn best by reading and rereading the textbook or their notes, writing and rewriting their notes, and in general, organizing items into lists. So some strategies we can use when encountering these students in our classroom is have them rewrite their notes after class. Use colored pens and highlighters to focus on key ideas. Have them write notes to themselves in the margin. Write out key concepts and ideas. Help them compose short explanations for diagrams, charts, graphs. Write out instructions for each step of a procedure or math problem. Print out your notes for later review. Post note cards or post-its in visible places. So some examples would be when doing dishes on the bottom of the remote. So that's how they could also do that at their house to help them. You can also have vocab mnemonics. Organize your notes/key concepts into a PowerPoint slideshow. compare your notes with someone else's, and repetitive writing, like the hangman game. So all of these are great strategies that you can use to help the student be successful in your class.
The last learning style that we'll discuss is the kinesthetic learner. A kinesthetic learner learns best by using their hands, which we often call hands-on learning, or by full body movement. They learn best by doing. They learn well in activities that involve performing, like athletes, actors, dancers. They work well with their hands in areas such as repair work, sculpting, art, or working with tools. And they are well coordinated with a strong sense of timing and body movements. The following are some characteristics of a kinesthetic learner. So they often wiggle, tap their feet, or move their legs when they sit, and they often have been labeled as hyperactive. So some strategies for teachers when they're dealing with kinesthetic learners. They can have the students handle objects, tools, or machinery that you are studying. They can create manipulatives, like study tools that you can move around with your hands. They can cut charts or diagrams apart so that you can practice assembling them in the correct order. They can use exaggerated movements and hand gestures when they're having the students study. Drama, dance, and role playing use these large muscle movements. That would be helpful. Use a computer to type information and access muscle memory through keyboard strokes. They can have the students walk as they recite or practice information. You can have the students work at a chalkboard, flip charts or large poster paper to create study tools, learn through creative movements and activities, and create action games. Convert the information that they're studying into an actual game.
So this slide kind of puts together and helps us focus on these learning styles for each individual sex, right? So we have our female sex and we have the male sex, and which learning style is most likely to occur in each. So looking at the first graph, it looks like for females, the unimodal model is what is going to happen for your female students, most likely. So 54.2% of female students will be one of these learning styles, whereas for males, 58.3% will be the quad modal, meaning that they are going to exhibit and benefit from all four learning styles. Getting kind of specifically into those learning styles, females get the most benefits from the kinesthetic learning style and those strategies, whereas males are still overwhelmingly multimodal. So males, you're going to want to use kind of a combination of every strategy we mentioned, whereas females, you might have to kind of play the waters and see how they do.
So now we're going to discuss the pros and cons of single-sex schools. By this point, you've seen the statistics and have learned about the learning styles that school students possess and have probably formulated an opinion on the subject. Here are some of the benefits of single-sex schools that directly relate to the information already discussed. So single-sex schools offer a sense of family. There's less distraction, especially during the teenage years. It's said to, it's easier to concentrate on work in these single-sex schools. American psychologist and author of the book Why Gender Matters, Leonard Sachs, and others agree that merely placing boys in separate classrooms from girls accomplishes little, but single-sex education enhances student success when teachers use techniques that are geared towards the gender of their students. Advocates claim co-ed schools tend to reinforce gender stereotypes, while single-sex schools can break down gender stereotypes. For example, girls are free of that pressure to compete with boys in male-dominated subjects such as math and science, which we already talked about earlier. Boys, on the other hand, can more easily pursue traditional feminine interests such as music and poetry. And we have that, feminine in quotations because it is a stereotype. Teachers can use techniques geared towards that specific gender and reach the whole class, which will be a lot easier on the teacher and a lot less learning styles that the teacher will have to plan for. Research shows that girls mature faster, therefore, boys within their classes may hold them back. And some research finds that girls learn better in warmer temperature. So, this would be, a possibility in single sex classrooms to make it warmer.
Some of the cons of single-sex schools. We found that students who attended these co-ed schools have reported that their cultural awareness was broadened, along with their ability to interact with the opposite sex. They need this experience with the opposite sex in schools so that they know how to act around them later on in life. So this can either be in the workforce or if they move on to college. If they go all these years without learning how to interact with the opposite sex, it's going to be damaging, and it's going to be damaging adjustment period in the real world for these students after attending this single sex school for all these years. They're just not adapt and equipped with the proper tools that they need to be successful in the real world. The American Council on Education reports that there is less academic disparity between male and female students overall. They claim that a far greater achievement gap is between students in different racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic groups, with poor and minority student children faring poorly. So bridging the academic chasm deserves more attention than does the gender divide. Also, not all same-gendered children are the same. So those techniques that the teachers are going to use that are specifically for a specific gender may not work. Not all children are the same. We know that. There's also no research that shows that this is more effective academically than co-ed classrooms. And teachers would need more training in teaching the specific gender.
Here we've attached a video that touches on the question of whether kids do better in single sex or co-educational classes.
So for our activity, we envision this being able to be done in this college class during the presentation, but also you could bring this into your classroom at school. So what we envision is one side of the room is the yes side, the other side is the no side. You will ask these yes/no questions and have a follow-up discussion after each, where you'll have at least one person from each side sharing why they chose that option. So some of the questions that we have come up with, and you can feel free to add your own if you can think of more, are I excel in math/science class. A baby boy can play with a baby doll. A baby girl can play with toy cars. Boys can wear pink. Girls can wear pants. Boys can wear dresses. I am better at math/science than any other subject. Boys and girls can wear makeup. I feel more comfortable around others of the same gender. I spend more time thinking about my relationships than my schoolwork. So these questions we hoped would allow for an open discussion on gender stereotypes and an opportunity to learn and hear from peers. It also brings up an understanding about the students' opinions on single-sex classrooms. So we feel that this activity would be a great option to do at any level. You can hear from the younger kids, the older kids, and even college level students.
Here's a list of some of the sources that we use to gather our information. Hopefully this presentation helped you develop an opinion on whether you think single-sex schools can be effective or not.